recording.
All right, hello everybody. My name is Michael Dunn. I'm the Assistant Vice President of Equity and Inclusion and the Title IX Coordinator.
And my name's Helen Ann Lawless. I'm the Assistant Director of the Title IX office. And we're so glad that we can meet with you all today to talk about the climate survey.
Yes, so we are recording this kind of initial presentation of the climate survey data so that we can share it on the website and on social media. And then we will turn off the recording after that kind of initial run. And so we can have a conversation with the folks who are here. And we are really excited to share this information with you. We're a little later in the semester than we wanted to be. And so we will continue to share this information as folks come back to campus in the fall.
All right, so a little bit more about how we run the climate survey and what the participants of the climate survey actually look like. So the climate survey was launched in mid to late January, open until February 9th. And we are really happy because we got up to a 30% response rate again. I think our all-time high was 31% a few years ago. But again, this is even up from 27% in 2020. And just as a kind of a some good info for everybody. Usually the gold standard, I feel like, of surveys is 20% response rate. And so we are really proud of this number. And another reason why we're proud of it is that historically, climate survey participants have been sort of an overrepresentation of both white students and female students on our campus. And this year we made a very intentional outreach to all sorts of student groups on campus to help make sure that we're getting a more representative sample of what sexual assault experiences are like all across campus, not just with students who are white or students who are women. And so you can see we're starting to close that gap. In 2020, there was about a 10% overrepresentation gap of white students on campus. That's down to 5% this year. With gender, it's still relatively the same, around 10%, but again, we're still making efforts to make this survey as representative as we can, because that will ultimately better inform the work that we do. And shout out to our friends in Office of Institutional Research. We know some of y'all are here today for your analysis and helping us with the conclusions of this survey. And so, getting into what we're going to talk about today, here's a little bit of an outline. First, we're kind of going to give you a high-level overview of the results and kind of like what we see the big picture is going to be. Then we're going to dive a little bit deeper into perceptions of campus culture, of the people who work here, and how our students think the college might handle an incident of sexual harassment. Then we're going to kind of shift gears a little bit, talk a little bit more about the realm of prevention, whether that be about social norms, bystander intervention, resources on campus. Then we're going to get into the incidence rate on campus and then wrap it up with all the exciting programming that we do throughout the year and kind of looking ahead of what's ahead of us for next year.
So to give you an overview of the executive summary, this year we found that student opinions continue to show a markedly positive trend to increase on nearly every survey measure, including perceptions of the general campus culture, perceptions of Title IX processes, perceptions of faculty, staff, and administrators, and knowledge of Title IX campus resources. So we were really excited to see this result. Many of these metrics have actually reached their most positive values in 6 years, which is great. There continue to be some students who are dissatisfied with Title IX processes and procedures, and the comments talk about reasons that are similar to previous years. Perceptions of few consequences for offenders, an unsafe reporting process, and general concerns about safety on campus. And we'll talk a little more about what those comments look like as we continue. Also, among all of these survey respondents, 12% indicated that they had experienced some kind of sexual assault or sexual violence since coming to the college. And that was a big drop from 22%, which was reported last year. And it's likely that this lower number is at least in part related to the lower number of students on campus due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And so there's more to unpack there as well.
All right, so now we're going to start really diving into it, a lot of the different questions and the multi-year trends that we've been seeing. And first, we're going to be starting out with perceptions of campus culture. And so as Michael was saying earlier, a lot of these are on multi-year trends upward, right? We've been making a lot of progress. I think those first two you can see, feeling valued in the classroom learning environment. Shout out to our faculty in the room who helped this metric so much. Happy to be at the college, a collective effort that we're all working on doing together. And then these next two I think are really interesting, especially given the context of the pandemic. I feel close to people on this campus actually is at an all-time low in this kind of 6-year analysis. And it's probably no surprise that, you know, the pandemic may have had an impact on that. And so that similarly with, I feel like I'm a part of this college. I think, you know, we've all been doing our best to make sure that students are engaged and involved during this time when we're so limited in the ways that we can be with each other. But those two metrics, I think, took the biggest hit out of all the ones we're going to talk about today. And we kind of have an inkling that it probably has to do with the pandemic. And then you also see that I feel safe on this campus is also on an upward trend. The other thing I'll say is, you know, why does feeling close to people on the campus and why does feeling part of the college matter when we're talking about sexual assault? And I think it's important to remember that connectedness and feeling connected to peers and feeling like a part of a community is actually a protective factor against sexual violence. So when you're looking at some of these and be like, I can't really connect the dots here, that is why this matters and why we like to track that over time. And so, you know, like we were saying, generally positive upswing, and we're seeing some negative impacts because of the pandemic. I think another interesting thing that we found this year was that there's actually a smaller gap now than there were in previous years between men and women regarding safety on campus. There also appears that there's not a difference based on racial identity. And we do have a small number of non-binary students who respond to the survey, and that group has been indicating lower ratings of safety, feeling safe on campus in response to the climate survey questions. And we might want to explore that further. And again, with this representativeness issue always in the back of our minds, making sure that we're trying to get as many people as possible to respond to the survey so that we can make kind of, you know, steady conclusions about what's happening and not just basing it off of a very small number. And finally, there was another trend previously where as a student progressed throughout their time at the college, that they started to respond more negatively about campus culture. And we actually saw that reversed this year, that first year students were generally more likely to feel negatively about campus culture in their experience. Again, we can think about that the first years don't have any other context of what a college experience is like, and that this year has been really difficult for them, in particular, forming bonds, making friends, where our returning students already had those social networks that they could rely on, regardless of whether or not they were virtual. And we're really excited to talk about our hotspot mapping project. This is going to be sort of a longer project that we're going to be working on. And this was us dipping our toe into the water for that. And so we presented participants with this question: during a typical year, where do you feel unsafe as it relates to sexual violence on campus? And we showed them these two pictures of North Campus and South Campus, and these rainbow color quadrants are just the selection options that they had available to them and how we were breaking them up and labeling them. And so when we got the results back for that question, this is how it broke down. You're only going to see quadrants that are highlighted if they were greater than 2%, if they were selected more than 2% of the time. And then you can see there's this gradient, right, of the hotspot. So the lighter it is, the fewer people selected that spot. Orange is sort of like in that middle realm. And then red are the locations that our students selected more frequently. In particular, thinking about both the North Woods and the QA Woods. Then we got in this orange space, parking lots, LQ townhouses, Church Point, and Route 5. And then there was another component of this question where we asked a little bit more about and gave them an opportunity with an open-ended question to talk about what about those spaces makes them feel unsafe. I'm sure, unsurprisingly, we can see with the woods that darkness and light is a feature that makes our students feel unsafe. And that is seen throughout some of these yellow range selections as well. And then, shifting to a different environment, which is the townhouses, LQ, we can see sort of concerns around social pressure arising as well, that maybe if there's a party atmosphere and a lot of people are gathering, maybe there's pressure to drink or socialize in a way that some people might not feel comfortable with. Again, concerns about isolation. And I think the most interesting part about this, at least, is the big concerns that are lighting up when you're talking about Route 5. That, our students are saying that it's through Route 5, you can easily access campus, and maybe there are concerns around there with safety, and that there have either been concerns about or incidents of catcalling, and that the traffic is really heavy around there. And so we want to dive much deeper into this data. We're hoping to hold focus groups where we can talk to students about, does this align with what, your perceptions of campus? Again, kind of getting more understanding about these factors that contribute to feelings of being unsafe, and then also connecting a little bit more about, does perception equal risk, which we're going to talk a little bit more about, I think, in the next few slides.
And before we move on, Helen Ann, can I just jump in and just really thank and appreciate Anne Marie and Chris for their amazing work. This was a brand new question. And the way our colleagues in IR kind of helped us with these images and came up with these areas and presented this data in such an elegant way, I just find it so amazing, and we really appreciate their help.
Yeah, and it was so user-friendly. And I will also say, at least the buzz I heard around students, like, they were excited about this question. It was fun for them in a survey that is not usually fun for people to take. It's not, and so I think this is going to be such a good tool for us, and one our students are really excited about as well. And so, yeah, kind of transitioning to this question of, does perception of feeling unsafe equal actually being unsafe? And so we do know a little bit about where incidents of sexual violence are happening on campus between reports that we received to our office and also additional questions in the hotspot mapping survey, or sorry, the climate survey in general. And we want to do a further analysis about how these sections may align, or these quadrants that are kind of like lighting up on this map, how that aligns with incidents of sexual violence. We do know that a lot of incidents of sexual violence happen on campus, in on-campus housing, also in off-campus housing. We also are gathering more information about the dynamics of where incidences occur, whether it be a reporting party's residents or a responding party's residents, and that those might not necessarily be places where our students would feel unsafe. They might not indicate that they felt unsafe in their own residence or feeling like that they were at risk there. Similarly, if it's someone that they're dating, if it's someone that they're familiar with, they might not initially indicate that they would feel unsafe in their friend or their partner's living space. But we're finding that, those are where sexual assaults do happen. And, there is this whole narrative around, I think that is kind of unraveling, which is a good thing, is that historically we view sexual assault as something that happens with a stranger who jumps out of a bush of a really dark place. And that is kind of reminiscent of some of the themes that we've seen on the hotspot map about the woods. We want to find out more about the woods. We think we've been given valuable information about concerns about these spaces. And something that we don't necessarily know is where students might be before maybe someone takes them to their on-campus residence and perpetrates a sexual assault. And so maybe there's still some more important information to learn there about, I don't know, facets of risk in that place. We're still, obviously we have a lot of questions. We're still working on figuring that out. And I think the overarching, so what, why are we doing this, is that we are really taking a step back and doing a more macro level environmental approach to sexual violence prevention. This is a shift that's happening in the field. We're really excited to kind of be at the front of that, at least locally. And, a good comparison to think about is when we look at traffic safety, right? Traditional intersections are a hot mess. There are a lot of motor vehicle accidents and pedestrian accidents. And in order to make traffic safety, pedestrian safety better, there's been this shift to roundabouts, which prevent a lot of those incidents, as you're seeing in this diagram. And so although we don't know what our environmental shift is yet that's going to prevent sexual violence, that is our ultimate goal of finding that key change to the environment that's going to reduce sexual violence and make sexual violence less likely in our community.
We're also working with Johns Hopkins University on a hotspot mapping project. As we were pulling our questions together and working on these issues here, we were able to connect with a research project out of the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health that's looking at these same questions. And so we are able to benefit from their expertise, and we are sharing with them some of our data as we advance the field together. So that's a really exciting opportunity as well. So moving on to the survey's perceptions of faculty, staff, and administrators, we ask the same questions every year about what faculty, staff, and administrators think about students and attitudes towards students. And so this question is about if folks respect what students think, and these bars represent the percentage of students who agreed or strongly agreed with all of these statements. And so you can see that faculty are perceived as being very respectful, as are staff, and administrators are creeping up there too. There was a lot of improvement this year for administrators. Perhaps the heightened communication around the pandemic helped with that. This year, we have defined administrators so that folks have kind of a shared understanding of who they are. And administrators are more of the like VP level folks working in Calvert versus other staff members on campus. The next question is about whether folks are perceived as treating students fairly. And again, you can see really high marks for faculty, nearly as high for staff, and administrators are on their way up as well. And there's also a question about whether faculty, staff, and administrators are genuinely concerned about students' welfare. And again, it's kind of the same pattern with faculty getting the highest marks, staff close behind, and then administrators bringing up the rear, but doing better than in years past. So hopefully that's a trend that can continue as well. So the next set of questions from a Title IX perspective are really important. These are student perceptions of how the college would handle a Title IX incident, an incident of sexual harassment. And so we have a set of 7 questions. And again, these are the ones that in many cases reached a 6-year high. And so we are so happy with the progress that we're making here. The first is about if the college would take a report seriously. We're up 5 points to 86% agreeing or strongly agreeing with that statement. Next, would the college maintain the privacy of the person making the report? We're up to 91% there. Next, if requested by someone, the college would forward the report to criminal investigators, holding steady at 90%. And the college would take steps to protect the safety of the person making the report. We're up to 83%. And they just started mowing the lawn right outside my window, so I'm sorry if it's loud. The next set of questions, the college would support someone making a report. We jumped up 7 points to 85%. The college would take action to address factors that may have led to sexual harassment. We're up 11 points to 76%. And would the college handle a report fairly? That is so important that we handle reports fairly. And this year, 80% agreed or strongly agreed that the college would do that. And so there's certainly room to improve in these, but I'm really proud of the work that we are doing as a community to work on these numbers and to build a culture that we all want to know and thrive in here on campus. So this was really positive to see. We also asked folks to share open-ended comments about Title IX and the Title IX office. The most frequent theme that came up was expressed by 11 people, and that was actually positive sentiments about the Title IX office and or the process. This was a decrease from 34% of people expressing positive feedback last year, but there was a higher number of participants providing comments then as well. And then on the negative side, there were 3 leading concerns that were addressed by 5 people each. And this is what we talked about at the beginning. First, concerns about insufficient consequences for offenders, negative sentiments about the Title IX office and the Title IX process, and folks hearing secondhand accounts about negative experiences with the Title IX process. And so these are issues that we are familiar with from the past. We really try to sort of shape our training and our communications and our programming to help address these concerns and to provide folks with education and information. And we still have work to do. And so the conclusions that we draw compared to all previous surveys since 2016, participant perceptions have substantially improved in all scenarios. And so this is very encouraging. And we're really proud of where we're going with that.
Yeah, it is really great. We even see people in the chat echoing that as well. I'm so glad that we get to share that with you. And also that Michael was saying, this is something that we do together, right? This doesn't like begin and end with the people in our office, that this is something that we do as a collective. And so we're grateful for all of your help with this as well. This is the fruits of your labor as well, not just ours. And so we're going to shift to talk about social norms and bystander intervention, which again, when we're talking about social norms, is more of this macro level approach to sexual violence prevention. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But, when we're looking at bystander intervention or supporting survivors on campus, here's a little bit about perceptions of how our students think their peers would react to someone reporting sexual harassment. And so this comes directly from the climate survey. We can see that, there's this question, most students at the college would support the person who made the report. That has been trending upwards, which is really impressive. And then you see that, and we want it to move upwards. Then these next two questions, we like the trend down. We want that to be a lower percentage. So that middle question is the alleged offenders or their friends would try to get back at the person making the report. You can see that's kind of holding steady around that 21, 23%, but it did jump up a little bit. And then most students at SMCM would label the person making the report a liar. Again, similarly holding steady at around 8 or 9%, but it is a 1% increase. And so that is how our campus community perceives those topic areas. But then we also have some good information about the reality of what's happening. And that actually comes from our EverFi online training for students that also has a survey component to it. We know that from that survey, 97% of our students who had the opportunity to do so helped someone else get support or find resources after an assault. And the sample size there was 98 students, which I think is still pretty impressive. And again, that is a pretty significant number, right? I mean, it kind of matches what people's expectations were, that they were widely positive, but it still is far and above, I think, even what students expect of their peers or were expecting of their peers. And then similarly, 93% of students said that they would never place blame on a survivor of sexual violence. And that was from 645 students who answered that question. And again, something that is really impressive and heartwarming, and kind of counters some of the narrative that we hear from students, which is maybe they don't think their student or their peers would be supportive. And the reason why that matters is because if someone thinks that their peers aren't going to be supportive, or that they don't take sexual violence seriously, they're less likely to reach out for help. They're less likely to connect with resources when we're talking about people who've experienced sexual violence. Similarly, if they think their peers don't take sexual violence seriously, they're going to be more likely to perpetrate sexual violence. So our job with this data is to educate people about what the true norms are, which is that people care, they're intervening, and they're supporting our students. And so that is really, I think, going to make a huge impact again on reporting, accessing resources, and preventing violence before it happens. And again, we have some great bystander intervention questions embedded in the climate survey as well. Another increase of people saying, yes, I did intervene. And I don't think that necessarily means that there's an increase in situations where someone could intervene, but more that our students are more aware of how to assess a situation as a high-risk situation, feel confident in their ability to intervene, and are actually intervening. Getting over that barrier of I considered intervening, but I didn't do it, right? Building that confidence among our students, building out their skill set so that they feel good about intervening and safe intervening. And I think it's important to underscore here, like we're looking at percentages, but these actions change people's lives. It maybe not all of them, but a lot of them could have prevented a sexual assault from happening. And that is so powerful when we're talking about prevention. So these actions do matter.
We also asked folks about their knowledge of campus resources, and we had some interesting results here. On the first question, if a friend or I were sexually assaulted, I know where to go to get help. We lost a percentage point, and so we're at 92%, which is still great, but we want to keep going upward there. The next question, if a friend or I experience sexual harassment, I know where to go to make a report. We went from 92 down to 89, which is still pretty darn good, but there was a little slippage there. And finally, on that last question, I understand what happens when a student reports a claim of sexual harassment. That moved upward to 83%. And so these are really good numbers. We want folks to know where to go. We want to normalize conversations about these issues and make sure that resources are accessible and available to everybody. Personally, I wonder if some of the kind of communication and interpersonal challenges of the pandemic may have prevented us from sort of reaching the same high numbers that we have in the past. But I think this is an opportunity for us to think about how we're communicating. Are we meeting students where they are? And how can we just kind of continue to sharpen and hone our outreach efforts?
All right, so now we're going to shift a little bit into the section of the climate survey that asks students about their experience with sexual assault and sexual violence. And this is only from the students who said, yes, I'd like to answer more about this. Students can absolutely bypass this section. And I think that's important to underscore too. And so as Michael had indicated earlier, the incidence rate overall for this participant pool is at 12%, which is a decrease from previous years. And we already talked about how, we're kind of getting a feeling that the pandemic may have had an impact on that. And then you also have the prefer not to say section, which also may have been people who said, I don't want to talk or answer any more questions about this. And, something that we've been talking about a lot that we want to share is more broadly what high risk times of year there are for sexual violence, and also what sorts of demographics or identifying factors might also be high risk as well. And so we know that nationally, first year students are the highest risk group on campus. Earlier we were talking about that students who are sophomores, juniors, seniors, they're able to build out a social network. They have friends here. They feel connected, that connectedness that we were talking about earlier. And that first years face a really steep learning curve when they're coming to a whole new place and trying to build out a totally new social network in a, most of the time, brand new place. We also know that this data about this high risk category is reflected locally on our campus, that 62% of the students who disclosed an assault in the climate survey said that it occurred during their first year. Even though we had a smaller number of people, that 12% indicating that they had experienced sexual violence, last year's data was still similar, around 61%. And this year, we saw that first years had a significantly lower incidence rate, 4%, compared to their upper class peers of 13 to 17%. And so, looking ahead to this coming year, here are kind of some of the concerns that we have about that, which is, when we're thinking about the pandemic and we're thinking about these lower incidence rates, changes to campus life, probably due to the pandemic, may have protected first years against sexual violence. And the question now is did that, taking away the party atmosphere, taking away maybe some of other high-risk situations that people exploit to perpetrate sexual violence, did that allow first year's time to gain those protective factors that we were talking about, getting connected to campus, gaining supportive friends, having a trusted adult in their life, like a faculty member or maybe a support staff on campus, which would then prevent them from experiencing sexual violence in the future, theoretically, right? This is all based off of these risk and protective factors that we're talking about? Or did that just kind of stop the watch, put everything on pause, delaying that first year red zone for our returning sophomores until, they return to a typical college experience that we're sort of anticipating for the fall. And so with that in mind, we're really trying to heighten our prevention efforts for both returning sophomores and incoming first years during this time, in addition to what we would otherwise traditionally conceptualize as the red zone. And I agree in the chat, Scott said the concept of a delayed red zone is particularly worrisome possibility. That has definitely been on my mind, especially now that this academic year is over. It's something that we're thinking about a lot. And so another thing about, in addition to just saying yes or no, this happened to me and here's when it happened or where it happened, people also talked about who they told about an incident. And we're proud that routinely over the last couple of years, we're in this top bracket, right? We've been tied for second for a few years in a row now. And you can see the other, both SMCM resources and other resources that make this list as well. Something that we tell our students a lot when we're talking about bystander intervention and being an empathetic peer is that far and away, if they're going to tell anybody, they're going to tell their close friend. And how do we prepare our students to respond and react in those situations? And that's really where our bystander intervention training and all of our different prevention training comes into play. In addition to that, students get to share a little bit more about the quality of the help of the resources that they accessed. Again, because we had smaller numbers this year of people who experienced sexual violence and wanted to share more about their experiences. We had 5 or fewer responses for most of these categories. And so we have to keep that confidential, right? We don't want to risk anybody's privacy to sharing about what they shared about these resources. And so you can see the 2020 chart there to kind of see what past years have been like. One thing that we can report on, because there are more numbers about it, is that a total of 9 participants indicated that they received help from our office. 6 had indicated that it was good or very good quality of help, which is a bit of a drop from last year, where 18 of the 23 participants indicated that our office was good or very good with the help that they received. But again, because of this decreased sample size, having only a total of 9 students who received help from the Title IX office as opposed to 23, which is between 2 and 3 times more than this year, it's difficult to interpret whether or not this change is meaningful. And so we're still going to continue to keep an eye on it. It's still valuable information for us to have. But when we're talking about this trend analysis, it's really hard to compare this data set to other years just because of how small the sample size is. And so now we're going to talk a little bit about Title IX programming and the information that we're able to capture from the climate survey about our programming. And so one of the questions in the climate survey is, what programs or prevention activities have you attended during your time at the college? And virtually everyone receives the orientation meetings or the online training. They might not remember that they did it, but they most certainly did. And then also it goes down to the, their club conversations or team conversations with the Title IX office. That's, a lot. We go and visit with the sports teams every year. We've been trying to expand that out to clubs. Also the bystander intervention training that we've been talking about, DVAM, which is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, our Call to Men workshops, escalation, and Take Back the Night. The next few questions that we're going to look at only are analyzing Domestic Violence Awareness Month, a Call to Men, and escalation workshop, just because they are some of our bigger, more elective events. And the findings there, as we'll talk about in a little bit, are really interesting. And so again, with this, we can kind of compare, these people who have participated in or are embedded in our prevention efforts. How do their responses to the climate survey compare to the rest of the population? And you can see a lot of people generally it's all clustered together. They all feel pretty valued in the classroom. Again, I think that really speaks to the power of our faculty and how much they care about students. With some of the Call to Men participants and escalation workshop folks drawing out to the front a little bit, it's important to know for the rest of this data set that a Call to Men participants and escalation workshops participants are more likely to be athletes on campus. I would say maybe 90 to 95% of those participants are also D3 athletes. So I think that's important to remember, especially now when we're jumping into feeling close to people on campus, feeling a part of the college and being happy at the college. You see those events are coming out in front. There might be other factors that play into that aside from just participating in our events, right? I think that the Domestic Violence Awareness Month events draws a more representative crowd from our college population. And so maybe then even participating in the events and coming out to these events on campus helps them feel closer to people in our community and feeling part of the college. But then when we look at Happy at the College, Safe on Campus, Domestic Violence Awareness Month group is sort of lagging behind. And some questions that I have are, are participants who from the Domestic Violence Awareness group, are they more likely to have experienced an incident of sexual violence? Did it happen at the college? Is that what's impacting their happiness here and their feelings of safety on campus? So it's definitely still areas that we want to explore. The rest of these charts are a little bit more straightforward, especially now given sort of the dynamics that we know about the groups that we were talking about here when we're looking at perceptions of Title IX. And it's sort of skewed across the board, but you see, especially with the Call to Men, which also are disproportionately men who are those participants, feel more positively about Title IX compared to participants who were involved in the escalation workshop or DVAM. I think the couple that stick out to me are protecting the safety of the individual and maybe even supporting the individual handling the report fairly. Again, some of this data is hard to tease out, but it's all valuable information for us to kind of think about what sorts of messages now should we be leaning into when we're talking about this programming. If we have this, captive audience and we know sort of generally about their perceptions of our office or campus culture or safety, can we use that as an opportunity to share more about our work on campus and the reports that we receive and the action that we take on those reports. And so that, I think, is how we use this moving forward. And this one, I think, is the most exciting chart because we're seeing that the folks who go to escalation, the folks who go to Call to Men, the folks who participate in Domestic Violence Awareness Month, they're more likely to know where to get help, where to make a report, and understand what happens, which means that, once they're sort of in our doors or Zoom rooms or whatever, and they're receiving the content that we're providing to them, and so that they have more information about these resources and support systems on campus, which is really exciting. You're muted.
So I'm muted, thank you. So as we go forward here, we are continuing to kind of chew on the survey data and really identify the conclusions we can draw from it. Today is the first step in our plan to share this information out with the campus community. And so we're looking forward to revisiting this data, especially as the fall semester begins. And as Helen Ann said, we're going to be having a focus group in the fall to discuss that hotspot mapping data and to better understand what this first round of information means and where we go from here. And finally, leaving you with a couple of updates from the Title IX office. The Board of Trustees just approved a new Title IX policy to support pregnant and parenting students, which we're really excited about as a way to articulate the rights of pregnant and parenting students to get their education and to explain some of the resources and supportive measures that are available to them. In addition, we are hiring our student interns for next year. We have a couple of Title IX intern positions and a Call to Men intern position. And so please encourage students to check that out and save the date for our on-campus, in-person A Call to Men programming, which will be happening the week of September 20th. I know your calendars are empty, so mark it right now. And again, we're really excited about those focus groups. That was a lot of information, and that is all the information we're going to leave you with for now. And so I think we can turn off the recording and have a conversation with the folks in the room.
Yeah, one quick thing I will say for our folks who maybe in the future are watching this recording is if you have any questions or follow-up or you want to learn more about this information, please feel free to reach out to Michael or I. Our contact information is there. That goes for people in the Zoom space as well. But with that, thank you so much for joining us if you're watching the recording, and we're going to move forward with our discussion now.